Community Conversations, presented by the Steve Fund.
Today, we're going to be discussing reframing the present and future during COVID-19. And our adult supervision and one of our key leaders is David Rivera, who's our national advisor at the Steve Fund. And the Steve Fund is so proud and pleased to have David lead us today with his wisdom. We also have Jay Wang, our Youth Advisory Board Chair, Danny Bell, Youth Advisory Board Member. I'm Gordon Bell, and I'm pleased as I can be to take part in this discussion. Let me say a few words about, David Rivera. Before that, I'll mention I'm lucky enough to work with the Steve Fund because I'm Steve's uncle. And I happen to have been a longtime Wall Street guy who is currently working in a not-for-profit at Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation. And I do some investing as well with Legacy Growth Partners. And that says it for me. My most important role is being Steve's uncle here, and I really treasure the community we have brought around us at the Steve Fund. And at the head of that community, we have a gentleman named David Rivera, who happens to be our national advisor. He's also a guru at CUNY, the City University of New York, and we got to work together at CUNY recently with the head of CUNY, Felix, who's just terrific, and bring a real special day to that community and rally understandings and support for the mission of the Steve Fund. And David, I think you were amazing there. You helped to bring your community together with us and lead to some really powerful action points. The Youth Advisory Board Chair is a guy named Jay Wang, and I've seen him, as I have seen David around the country, working with us dynamically at presentations and Steve Fund conferences. His bio is displayed on the screen, I think, in just a moment, if we can get Jay's bio up, and a terrific picture of him in the blue blazer, which I think is very natty. Jay has worked to drive deep understandings in our student communities and to rally the support of other students who are able to help kind of bring our gospel out to wider and wider circles and to include everyone, which is really important. LGBTQ and other youth, all sorts of circles and folks, people of color who may have special stresses in their communities in large institutions. I think it's so valuable that Jay has been our leader and a great catalyst for young people. Sitting next to me is Danny Bell. I know her pretty well. We get to be quarantined together, so I see Danny all the time. It's a blessing. She has matriculated at an all-girls high school, and then she took off to go on a tour singing with Up With People, and then this COVID thing hit and changed her life dramatically from a world tour, which is so inclusive, to being pretty much sequestered at home with her family. So lots of us have stories about how this has changed our lives, but COVID-19 really changed the Up With People program to complete shutdown. And now they're a virtual community, one that would have been involving themselves in performances day after day and in public service all over the country / all over the world, here, Canada, and Europe. So there is someone special that David Rivera wants to share with us today, and it's sort of a surprise guest star. I can't wait to hear more about this individual. David, please tell us a bit about who's joining us today.
Yeah, so I've recruited one of my students, someone I've worked closely with for the past few years, Brandon Bailon, who is a senior in secondary education at Brooklyn College and also the coordinator of the CUNY LGBTQ plus student leadership program that I also direct. And so he's going to bring his experiences as a student and as a community builder to our conversation today.
Fantastic. Welcome. I have to say, the Steve Fund is the kind of institution where everyone looks across the room, looks across the virtual room, and realizes the richness that each one of us brings to our community. We've really enjoyed the different kinds of folks who joined our efforts, and some are academic leaders, some are practitioners, students, faculty, advisors, staff of institutions that really all come together to make a difference. I love the fact that we are who we are, humble and respectful and inclusive. And I hope that you do as well. Um, David, the first thing I have to say is I am not sure what reframing is. Reframing, I think, is more a term of science and art and something you understand. For me, shifting my understanding a little bit about something is how I understand reframing, but I believe it means something more psychologically. And I'd love for you to share with us as we get into this conversation about reframing the present and future.
Mhm.
During
Yeah, Gordon, you're definitely right on track. It's about shifting our frame of reference, especially when we are enduring traumatic or challenging experiences, things that we often attribute maybe negative emotions to or negative outcomes. But reframing is a concept that we use in counseling and psychology. It's also part of several of the steps that I've been talking to people about in terms of how to make sense and cope with the current COVID-19 crisis. One of those is naming the emotions that you're experiencing. There's a lot of strength and power in being able to give name and reference points to what we're experiencing, not only in terms of the thoughts that we're having, but more importantly, what are the emotions that we're experiencing? And then from there, it's also important to recognize, especially in this context, that we're not in this alone. We're experiencing this together as a collective globally. And that can also bring some solace to people. I teach group counseling, and one of the tenets of group counseling that makes it very effective in comparison to individual counseling is the sense of universality that occurs in a group context when folks are sharing their trials and tribulations with one another. It helps them to feel less lonely. And the other concept is reframing. Again, it's a psychological concept. Well, in a psychological sense, the concept is basically being able to understand our experiences from different frame points or reference points. Thinking about a traumatic experience or a troubling time that we've gone through and pulling out the lessons that we've learned. As an educator and a lifelong learner, I honestly and truly believe that every experience we have is an opportunity for learning and growth. And if we take a reframing position, it can help us to expand that learning, expand that growth, and find those golden nuggets of learning, of opportunity, and of strength that we can find in even the most adverse of experiences. And so I believe that the conversation that we're going to have today via the lens of the young people that we have on the call will help us to kind of identify the ways that they've been able to reframe this experience and the lessons that they've learned through going through this adversity.
Two quick questions still at you, David. One, I think I'm afraid sometimes. And when I'm afraid, I don't want to focus my attention on the problem. I want to run from it. And if I run from it, I don't think I have the chance to really do the exercise you talked about, reframing. And I'm not sure that's part one. Is it common that people want to run away? And two, do they recognize when they're going through difficulties, some of the powerful things you just mentioned? Do they know that thoughts and feelings aren't the same thing? It feels like a jumble. I got some pretty bad news about one of my employees recently, and I'm stunned. I think she's stunned. Her aunt just passed away, and I don't know if we're processing yet. So reframing, is it when can you do it? How can you do it if you're feeling stunned? Give us some context for how this process begins. How do you get your feet on the ground and begin to start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gordon, I think you're spot on with the experience that many are having, including myself, that impulse to run away from the thing that is troubling us. And that can be those very thoughts and feelings that exist within us that we kind of want to run away from them or compartmentalize them and place them in some place that isn't quite as accessible. And maybe we need to do that sometimes. Maybe the emotion or the experience is just so grand and great in the moment that we need to kind of shift our attention to something else that can kind of relieve some of that pressure. However, that issue still exists. No matter how deeply we bury something, it is still there. And so it's really going to be to our advantage if we kind of sit with what's going on. Sometimes we don't even need to do anything very active, but just let that emotion live. Emotions have a lifeline. They have a beginning and an end. Some last longer and some last longer because of how we kind of ignore them and displace them and compartmentalize them, but they're still there. And we can really do justice to our own well-being if we allow ourselves to kind of sit with some of those difficult emotions kind of understand how they're impacting us, not only emotionally and cognitively, but possibly physiologically, how they're impacting maybe our ideas of productivity. I think that's something that has been spoken about a lot, about productivity and what we do about that in this day of kind of distance education, work from home, et cetera. So it's good to kind of sit with it for a while so that we can understand the emotion and kind of understand how it's impacting us. But then we can also kick in that tool of reframing. And reframing is really a tool that needs to be learned. It's not something that comes naturally to most people. It's something that thankfully I had the luxury of learning through my training as a mental health counselor and as a psychologist. And it's something that I've been doing quite regularly because I have that tool. And in these kinds of talks that I've been doing with other communities, I've been really highlighting the importance of reframing as a tool that we can use to not only help us to make understanding of what's going on for us in the moment, but that's something that can actually bring some reprieve, some relief, some catharsis to the experience when we kind of look at it from a different angle, look at the lessons that we can learn from it, look at even some of the positivity that can come from it, which some of the questions that we have embedded in this presentation will kind of draw out.
That's so helpful. I think there's so many powerful things in what you just said. The first slide we had that said, it's okay not to be okay, that blue slide, that helped me think about how to respond to being frozen in fear. And I'd like to bring in our young people to comment and query about that feeling of bad news or a thought that turns into a fear that balloons into a debilitating moment, how to get to the point where you have your feet planted and you're still and you're aware enough to say it's okay not to be okay. David and students, who volunteers to share an idea or question or thought about this recognition? Danny, do you volunteer since you're sitting next to me?
Yeah, so I remember saying this, I think during our pre-chat for this, it's okay not to be okay. I think that's kind of like, I think a great place to start when you're working towards being okay again. And also like there are a lot of things that you can't control. So like when you're responding to those things, to expect to be, I guess, perfectly happy or well adjusted instantly is kind of unrealistic. So I think allowing yourself to not be okay or just being with yourself during this like really hard time, or being with others and just being there and supporting them and validating their feelings as we're going through this, I think it'll help us get through it.
Jay, you've been around a while and understand some of these important learnings. If you know you're not okay, does that prompt you to be still for a bit, or do you begin to reframe relatively soon after, or does that identify for you the need to start reframing because recognizing something's wrong but you don't quite have a handle on it, it requires some thought?
Yeah, so I think for me, I kind of go, so I have anxiety and depression, and it goes back and forth at times. And for me, sometimes, especially when I'm starting to get depressed, like there aren't really like core ideas or reasons behind it. My body kind of shuts down. My brain is just kind of like, we're done. We're not going to do anything right now. But in terms of my anxiety, it's easier for me to kind of assess like what exactly is the issue that's like freaking me out or kind of causing me to spiral a little bit. And with that, it kind of goes around with what Dr. Rivera was saying about reframing with emotions. There's a period where I kind of sit by myself and I like freak out a little, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening, and I start spiraling. But then there gets to a point where it's not as intense, and that's when I'm like, I have a core group of friends and family and confidants that I reach out to, and they're amazing. Like I would definitely not be able to do like half the things I'm able to do without my support network. And they just kind of sit me down and they're like, let's process this. Like and we kind of do this back and forth where if either of us are like anxious, they'll just be like, we'll kind of like shotgun it, like go back and forth, and we kind of like shoot down like anxious like branches that come out of our anxiety that kind of cause us to spiral. So like one of the things that happened recently was my MCAT that I've been studying for the past couple of months ended up being canceled. And unfortunately, I had a set time frame within the next couple of months to take my MCAT, then do a bunch of shadowing, and then send in my application, cross my fingers, pray to like all the deities, and get those interviews. But unfortunately, due to the quarantine, all my plans are shot. So there is a very strong possibility that I'm going to have to wait till next cycle, next summer, to apply. And because of that, that really sparked a lot of my anxiety because um, I'm like, that's another year that I have to do this. And technically it's 2 years. I'm like, what am I going to do for 2 years? And da, 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 da. And so I ended up reaching out to some of my like friends and family, and they were like, yeah, that sucks. Like, it's awful. And we're not like invalidating your feelings or whatnot. But it's also a process of like, let's kind of turn it around. What are some like specific things in your application or in your portfolio that you think may be like concerns for medical schools, or that are things that you personally wanted to pursue, but because of trying to do all these extracurriculars and all these other requirements that you weren't able to do, like, let's kind of take advantage of it. You said that it's like another year, another 2 years. Let's go ahead and see what you want to do. And that really helped me. Like, I'm actually in the process of like reaching out to serve as hopefully like a research assistant for a couple things for like LGBT youth and some housing situations regarding that. So hopefully that goes through, and also looking at more volunteer work and et cetera. So that's kind of like how I process it. I don't know if that like helps with other people, but yeah.
That inspires me. David, do you comment? It looks to me like Jay didn't get stuck and stay there. He's stunned and it's disappointing, and all this work that's been accomplished to prepare is impacted. But through the knowledge base of his support group and that lively interaction, something was possible. So you start off with saying it's not okay, and that turns into a different way of thinking. Are we getting close to some of the concepts, David, that make us feel more powerful and together?
Oh, definitely. So it's, again, like Jay acknowledged those feelings of it not being okay and the related emotional experience that he had, right? And so in reframing, we don't want to get rid of those experiences. The point isn't to invalidate our initial reactions. It's to kind of expand the reaction to include the other possibilities that can then give us the necessary motivation and even a state of mind that we can then use to move forward by reframing the situation, as Jay kind of very clearly articulated for us in this in his experience.
It sounds like a real masterclass. Since I can't do the MCAT that I planned for, worked for, moved my life around for, committed to, really took a shot at, and I'm disappointed and I acknowledge this sucks and I'm a little worried, etc. That means I also now have the chance to look at the portfolio of things I love, committed to, wanted to commit to, use my friends and family as a resource, grow deeper bonds, accomplish some of these other goals, etc. And I choose to put my energy into that, acknowledging that this wasn't like something I chose. This wasn't what I wanted, but man, I'm not going to sit here and stop. I'm going to embrace that other stuff. And maybe there's some new stuff in there that I will enjoy, or I'll contribute to and feel good about. That to me is, I think, where the power of what Jay understands, what the Steve Fund wants to promote, Dr. Rivera, your work, this is what we're all about. If we can acknowledge this is a way to do it and have others recognize it's possible, that can be something. I have another question. What have you learned about yourself during this time? And I open the floor and look for oral volunteers to say or share any aspect of this that they'd like.
If I may, and a few things that I've learned about myself is I can't believe I would miss the option of going to places or just getting to walk around. I naturally am an introverted person, but with everything going on, I can't believe I miss the option of wanting to go out. And now I'm starting to ask myself, like, am I truly an introverted person, or what aspects of that uh, has been highlighted due to this pandemic?
That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe my self-image is something that's going to expand as I experience life with the pandemic and virtual meetings and missing out on doing some things that I may have taken for granted. Let me ask you, Brendan, did you have any sort of noticeable introverted uh, feelings or characteristics, like maybe being shy or feeling uptight or drained of energy when lots of extroverts are making a lot of noise? And have you had that sort of experience as well?
Oh, definitely. I felt there was a limit, or I gave myself a limit as to when my energy would go up or down. And I've noticed with all the extra given time, that limit was something that I came up with, and quite frankly, there is no limit to that. I noticed that it was more of a barrier that I put up for myself to not want to talk or interact with people at a certain time or a certain point. And due to these events, I started to ask myself, why did I begin to do that? And now do I want to continue doing that moving forward? Which I don't.
Oh, wow. So that you've unlocked something, or the difficulty has unlocked something. You have more power and control over how to be in any given moment, and you don't have to necessarily stick within the definition of here's how a classic introvert would behave, therefore I kind of model. Any comments, David, on the understanding that we can be expansive even through challenge?
Yeah, definitely. So we're being forced to kind of sit with ourselves more right now than we typically would, which allows us a lot of opportunity to develop our self-awareness. So as Brandon was mentioning, he is able to recognize that there are these limits that have probably been placed on him by society, but also by himself. And it brings up a quote, and hopefully some of you get it: "The limit does not exist." It's a Mean Girls quote, but it's also a mathematical reference. And limits are often self-induced and also socially normed. And this is giving us some time to sit with ourselves to kind of recalibrate what our limits are, right? A lot of us are realizing I have actually a greater capacity to be alone. I have a greater capacity to develop things in my life that will help reduce some of the boredom that I might be experiencing from not being able to enjoy the things that would naturally bring me solace or comfort or joy in my life. And so I think questioning our limits and where are they really coming from? Are they from myself? Are they from society? Do they truly exist? And how else can I develop so that I can kind of just increase my cadre of resources, of inner resources that maybe I didn't even know were there, but now I've been able to kind of actualize, appreciate, and bolster, and now take with me forward.
You know, it's fascinating, David, as you say that. I think of the world being too much with us when we have 500 channels and so many radio stations, and things are always trying to get our attention. We're even getting those advertisements in text or in telephone calls, so there's nowhere to go without the world impinging upon our space to be ourselves and be free. And now we have this sudden situation where you're not commuting, and you will have therefore a few more moments, and you're not able to be out. So you've got some time when you're probably not running around. How do we use it? And I guess the next question, the blue question, I'll bring up to Alexis and everyone: how have you stayed connected to your school friends? And is that the one we're on? I think it is. To me, I'm really curious about how people might process this, because it seems that the norm is you get these situations where you are commuting, you're standing around, you're waiting, you're in classes, you have the ability to take for granted you're next to loads of people and they're available to you. And now that's not quite the same way. So I'd like us to explore how this new situation, and how do we respond to it? What's been happening? What are we doing actively to make a difference, to be connected to friends. And I wonder, even as a corollary, what will happen with the people who are acquaintances? Will you never have a chance to sit next to this person 2 or 3 times and therefore pick up a conversation one day because we're all sequestered in our homes? Do you have a routine, or do you have less of a routine in this current environment?
It's very tempting to take naps in the middle of the day. So I have to really discipline myself to stay on task.
The glory of a nap. There's got to be a new poem or short story about how great naps can be. I haven't had a nap in some time, but you make me ponder the mysteries and powers of refreshing yourself. There's an old expression, to trip the light fantastic, which effectively means to sleep and to awaken. And I think a nap gives you a chance to conclude what just occurred, get rested, and then start anew. There can't be too much said for naps. They're amazing.
Yeah, they are. I actually follow an Instagram account called The Nap Ministry. And the bio says, we examine the liberating power of naps. We believe rest is a form of resistance and reparations. We install nap experiences, founded in 2016. So I enjoy following them because they have really cool quotes about like the power of naps. And then also like, I guess naps in like a metaphorical sense, like stepping back from something, taking a break, and just finding little pockets in your day where you can kind of like have a restorative moment. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's neat. And some cultures, right? The nap is a part of the culture. In certain warm South American climes, you have the siesta, which is routine. Some of the major...
Which they got rid of in some places, and then they brought it back. So
in some Asian cultures, tell me if you know this, I remember one of my buddies working for an Asian investment bank. It was okay at the 2 or 3 o'clock hour to take a nap, putting your head down on a desk and taking a nap. And I think the current Google culture has little pods where you can go relax or take a nap away from your work group at the office, which is something I never experienced at the office. That makes me think that the unstructured Alexis gives you a chance to determine even more of how you want to be. It's not set norm.
It does. I feel like I guess one of the great things about this is that I do have a little bit more control of my time throughout the day, as opposed to during, like before, when I had to be someplace from 9 to 5 every single day and then come home and study. It's kind of like, I still, I can study whenever I want to. I don't have to do it. I don't have to work between 9 and 5, come home and study between 6 and 10. I can I can study between 12 and 4 in the morning if that's what I feel like doing, or and get up at 12 in the afternoon. So I guess that is one of the positives about this. And also it's kind of forced me to be more connected. I've never spoken to my friends and family as much as I do now. A lot of it is driven by worry though. Some of my family members, they fall into the high risk category if they were to come with the virus. And so I do worry about them. So, every day I'm calling, making sure that they're not going outside, that they have everything that they need, that they're taking their medicine. So it's forced me to, and allowed me to be more connected to them, even though I'm worrying, I'm still, connected, and I'm still, forging my relationships with them. So I guess it's, there's a good and bad side to the same coin.
Sure. David, let me come to you quickly and say...
I think Auntie Micah wanted to answer that one.
Go ahead, Auntie Micah.
No, anyway, sorry. So how do you stay connected to your school friends? So I was actually with a gap year program called Up With People, and we got sent home, I guess, 3.5 weeks ago now. So like my dad mentioned, it's kind of become a virtual community. So we have twice a week meetings called brain breaks, during which we can recommend TV shows and movies for each other to watch, or just chat, or do sing-alongs from songs from our show. So kind of reminiscing and still being able to connect. So we have people from, I think, 17 different countries in my cast. So we have people calling in from all over, and we get to see a lot of people again. And then we have a girls group chat, cast group chat, which I'm a part of those, and which is pretty cool. And then we stay connected to the staff through the Facebook group. And then other friends, I'll like text or FaceTime or whatnot. But also, like Alexis, I've been more in touch with like relatives, grandparents, and cousins because of this, and just checking on them, seeing how they're doing, how they're kind of adjusting to school, at home, online. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to talk about nowadays, and just trying to check in on everyone.
And then quick thing, sorry. Like what I tend to do is like I love doing like FaceTime dates where like I like just FaceTime a friend and we're like on video for like the next 4 to 5 hours and we're not necessarily talking to each other. We just mute our cameras, but it kind of does that like social facilitation type of deal where we're just doing our own business, and when we get bored or we're kind of like I need someone to talk to, we just unmute and just have a quick gabble, and then we go back to work. And then just as a follow-up, in terms of the napping thing, I also use napping for like some of my anxiety as well. I find that like when my brain is like muddled with a lot of anxiousness, like sometimes a good night's rest or like a quick like 1-2 hour nap, I know that's really long for some people for a nap, but for me that's like the perfect time, really helps to like calm my brain for me to go back and target and go after a problem that comes up. But quick little snippets, sorry.
I think I might try this because like if you kind of build it into your day, it probably could help like mental health, and I think even productivity too. Just kind of resting or taking a break and then coming back to it. Yeah.
And so, David, I was reaching to ask you, when you think about tools like naps, there's another question coming up that says, what tools and resources can we use to handle pressure and stress? And that question, I guess it's a pretty beige or peach color. Mm-hmm. Is a nap a viable tool? Is a routine a viable tool? How do you stay in sync, as the young people were talking about staying in touch with family and friends? I'm nervous about being off sync. If I get up too early or late, I'm missing out. I got office people, business here, some import business coming from Asia. I'm out of sync if I'm not with an office environment and certain kinds of routines. But what do you think about the tools and routines and naps? What kinds of things can we be exploring, and how do we figure out how to do this connecting?
So one thing I want to emphasize is that this whole experience is really making us understand how artificial the concept of time, how we have come to understand it, really is. You know, it's a human-made social construct. And it's one that is actually quite oppressive in many ways. And so I'm actually resisting our traditional notions of time and what that means for my daily practice of wellness and of productivity. So I think starting there can be helpful. That doesn't necessarily mean that everyone that you're working with is going to appreciate it in the same vein, but it's the truth. The time has been something that has been created by people, and it's been used as a mechanism of control and social order. And we're living in an age where we have to reimagine what social order means, right? And we can all be active participants in that if we kind of take control of our own life, our own schedule in a way that's most productive for us.
Powerful. David, some people think because they sit at a desk for 10 hours, they've done a lot of work, but maybe they haven't been productive.
Exactly.
Who's really productive for a number of hours and connects with people as they need to. It didn't have to be this routinized work from 9, lunch at noon, back on the job at 1:15, cut it off at 5, and turn your brain off and walk away from your work. So I guess I think back to when we were agrarian as humans or in tribal form, we always thought about work. If you're a candle maker, you think about work all the time. It doesn't start at 9 and end at 5. If you're a farmer, truly the day never ended. And people say that about mothers, right? Mothers never stop because they're mothers. In some instances, if you're aware enough, as you are, and you can be purposeful, you can find this oddly liberating, I guess, to be connected and thoughtful and productive. And I salute that. Any other thoughts before we leave this topic of tools and routines and mechanisms for handling some pressure and stress?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. Schedule consistency can be very helpful, regardless of your notions of time and what have you, but developing a schedule that works for you. This is really our opportunity to really individualize a lot of what it means to have a routine, what it means to have a schedule, and also our notions of productivity. One thing that I recommend and that I've been doing myself is each week I've been recalibrating my schedule and my environment. I've been really intentional and self-aware about what's working for me and what's not working for me. So I've had to rearrange my work environment. I've had to even just, in New York City apartments, there we don't really have a lot of space usually, but even just moving my work environment 10 feet from where it was last week has really helped me to become a bit more focused in the work that I have to do. Allowing yourself those pauses when you need them, when the emotions are kind of building up too greatly, when you get news or news filters in that is kind of impacting you in a way that is causing you to lose focus, take a pause. The pause can be maybe having a mindfulness moment where you engage in a mindfulness meditation. A mindfulnessforteens.com is one that I often recommend and that I often use for myself for recorded meditations of various lengths to help me kind of recenter myself. A nap. I'm not a napper because I'm not a graceful riser, if you will. It takes me a long time to wake up even from a nap. But I know that in my own apartment, when I don't have to be around other people, the nap has actually been very helpful because then I can wake up at my own pace. So again, figuring out what you need to do for yourself to take that pause, to reorganize your schedule, and to, again, reframe what time is and also what productivity is. There was an article in the New York Times about basically throwing our notions of productivity out the window. Staying home, which means staying safe for yourself and for others, and just getting through the day in a way that is gentle and less painful is all we can really expect of ourselves right now. If you're able to do that assignment, if you're able to do that work function that you need to do to get through the day as well, then that's great. But just staying in and staying healthy, that's what we need to be doing right now. And that's where our energies need to be focusing on in terms of the priorities that we have in our lives.
I have a question actually. So what are some of the differences between feeling really tethered and tied to time and kind of like restricted by time and just like developing your own schedule and sticking to it? Like, are there some similarities between having your own schedule and abiding by time along with the rest of the world? Or are there like a lot of differences? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of Danny, that's a great question. It's one that I'm still trying to figure out for myself because I do have things that are scheduled that I do need to be there for. But what I'm finding that is helpful is that I'm coming to that space with my authentic self. Last Tuesday, I had 2 back-to-back meetings, each 2 hours long, my program, at my academic job, my program meeting, and then our department meeting. And I wasn't having a good day. And I just let people know that. And people offered their support in various ways. But it was a way for me to be in that space and be my genuine self and let others know that I might not be on my game right now. So your expectations for my participation are going to have to adjust, right? And so that's also your way of advocating for yourself by being your genuine self, being authentic, and bringing those challenges to the table. Because again, everyone is experiencing them. And I've not come across anybody who has not been validating or appreciative of me sharing more openly what I'm going through.
That's powerful, and that's brave, David, to be that straight with people. I'm going to try to emulate that. I tend to feel like the pressure is on me if I have to do it, be in a leadership role, that I can't have a bad day because the whole team's depending on me. There are people who are depending on their jobs. And if I don't make the right decisions about this budget during COVID-19, they're not going to have jobs. And I don't want to let them down. So no matter how I'm feeling, I have to say, I can't ever show that I'm having a tough time or I'm concerned because I got to tell them, you relax, this is on me. I'm the leader. Just follow the team goal. But I think it might be brave to say, hey, I'm confused. I'm really confused, and I need to get our revenue sources in New York State, who's giving us this $2 million. I need to get that straightened out. And boy, that weighs heavily on me. I got work to do.
Everyone on this call is a leader in some capacity. And I think being an effective leader also requires us to model things in an effective way, given the current context. One of my really close friends and psychologist, Dr. Marcia Liu, when I was sharing this with her, she reminded me that morning, she's like, you're not only a leader, but you're also a participant. Yeah. You're also a participant. We're all going through this together, regardless of our role and what have you. And so it's good to kind of internalize that message and allow ourselves to be an active participant in this as well.
I'm finding a lot of value here, being able to move and think through how I use my time differently, how routines can be helpful, but we don't want time to be oppressive. The way to take naps, and if I were to be Charles Schulz, the famous cartoonist who invented Snoopy, I'd have one cartoon of David Rivera, Dr. David Rivera, and he says, take a nap, are you crazy? I'm not a morning person. The last thing I need is 2 mornings a day, right? That'd be horrible. And then the next iteration is the educated Dr. Rivera saying, really? Maybe I can find my inner napper and emerge more fresh and able to take on challenge. Maybe there's room for growth yet. And I think that that's what this whole discussion is about. The tools that we need, the new understandings we need to get through these times. And that's the next question. Oh, go ahead.
I actually have some tools to share, how to handle the stress and pressure. Sorry I didn't jump in earlier, but I just wanted to share one big thing. When I got home, it was just kind of like everything slowed down a lot. So I woke up the next morning and I was like, wow, like I feel like I need to just like move. I need to go somewhere. So I got up and I just like walked, and I went to this nearby hiking trail. I had on like upbeat music to, I guess kind of keep my spirits high. And then I actually, a long stalking trail here in New Rochelle. I don't know if I should say the location. Maybe we should beat that out after. Yeah. But I found like this rock and I just sat there and I meditated on it using an app called Liberate, which is by and for like the Black and African diaspora is how they phrase it. And I really like the meditating in nature one, because like I was actually there hearing the birds chirping, feeling the light breeze, and like meditating and realizing that even though like life as we know it, like time as we know it is kind of slowing down, like nature is still kind of moving on at a very steady pace. Our hearts are still beating. With every breath, we know that we're alive. So just really getting grounded in that was really helpful. And after a few days, I felt ready to start running again. So I started running around the high school lake, which was cool. We have a lot of giant Canadian geese, which are really fun. And for the first few days, they would like hiss at me. And then, or like they would kind of get really big because I would like run into them. And then after a while, they got used to me. So then they were a lot nicer. But I really enjoyed going for a run and just like getting sweaty and then feeling a lot more level-headed afterwards, and feeling like I could tackle the rest of my day. So I think for me, that's like a nice break. It kind of like splits up my day. It allows me to reset, refresh myself, and then I can keep going. And I think my family notices when I get back from a run, I'm a lot like happier. And they're like, I don't know, I guess if we ask my brother, he might say like, yeah, that's true.
So we have a requirement that we want Danny to run at least once a day. So
yeah, my mom's like, time for a run. Oh, look at the weather. It's so nice. Time for a run.
So thank you for thinking of those tools: nature, walking, contemplative, meditating apps, and ultimately one of your hobbies, running. Mm-hmm. And that continues us on, what do you need to get through this? What kinds of things do we need? And I look for responses from all of us. What do we need to get through this? And this is part of that framing. How do we think this is? Mm-hmm.
So I want to jump in real quick because I've seen this like all over social media, and I think it's so important to mention it, especially since we're talking about staying positive for the future. This isn't verbatim because there are different versions of it, but there's this like concept of like, I'm reading it off. It's like, if you don't come out of this quarantine with either 1, a new skill, 2, starting with what you've been putting off, like a new business, 3, more knowledge, you didn't ever lack the time, you lack the discipline. And I want to comment on that, even though it sounds logical in a sense, that is like one group of people. Like there are all sorts of people right now commenting this, and I don't mean to like call you out, Alexis. She recorded a wonderful panel that we're currently like fixing to post. But there was a specific quote that I want to share, and she said, I think people should handle stress the way that they handle stress and leave other people alone. That's what I think you should do. Some people have issues focusing at home, some people don't. Some people can be productive no matter what, and that's great for them. But this is not a time to belittle someone. This is a time to be uplifting people and to be encouraging them and comforting them in a time where there are so many of us that are dealing with this virus. So like with that, I think it's really important to like ask students who may feel very unproductive, who may be stuck in what I call limbo during this career path or for your career path, to be very forgiving to yourself. Like this isn't a time to kind of kick yourself in the dark, because like Dr. Rivera has mentioned, there are so many other people that are going through this along with you, that you're not the only one that's also like stuck in a place where like, I need to do something. But you may be processing this differently. Like we've mentioned, like some people just shut down, they need naps, they just go through their day to day. And if that's how you're surviving and eventually getting to that place where you're going to be thriving after all of this, that's great. And then for some of us, like I mentioned, like I don't know if this is the proper like PC term, but I'm more of like a high functioning anxiety, like anxious person, where like I take all that anxious energy and put it into projects, which is why I'm always like, let's go, 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 go. But some people like they're a little more low functioning. They kind of shut down, they're anxious, and it, for like the very anxious people, like it gets to a point where it's debilitating, like they can't do anything, right? And that's why it's anxiety disorder. So like, I don't know, that's like one resource that I really wanna, that has been really helpful for me, that like, it's okay for me to like, in the next, God forbid, however long we're stuck in quarantine, for the next couple of weeks, like it's okay just to breathe. It's okay to do what Danny was mentioning, like go out, take some breathing exercise, do some meditation, do some anesthetic self-care is what I call it, which is like just brain numbing activities like binge watching YouTube or binge watching Netflix shows, just whatever to just calm yourself down and not freak yourself out too much. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get on a soapbox, but it's like one thing I really wanted to point out.
Let's keep widening. Anyone else with a point of view that is different? What you open the door for is that we're all going to process this terribly differently, and that's okay. That's really okay. And we shouldn't have someone else's expectations on us ruining what we're going through. What if I'm quieter and deeper and not so productive? What if I'm supporting a family member and I'm not being so productive? I don't feel the need to learn 5 languages to validate, right? That's really fun, and it makes me feel better about the fact that I haven't learned 5 languages, Jay.
Yeah.
What else do we need to get through this? I want to keep this open just for a second longer, because as a dad, I feel like I need to help structure the lives and opportunities and the skill acquisition for my kids so they can take it and run with it. I'm not the kind of dad that says you have to play my sport or read the book that I say, but I want you to do something that's self-expressive and you find meaning in and makes a contribution to the world. Those are the kinds of guideposts I throw out there, but they're not hard and they're not totally, they don't dominate your time. I feel a little concerned. I don't know how to support this amorphous, we're on a timeout, but I'm not sure how long it's going to last and what it's going to look like. And as a guy who knows a little bit about business and the economy, I'm not sure what it's going to look like. Real estate is very different than it was 10 years ago with everything going online. And after this, and so many small businesses going out of business, I'm not sure what we're going to be opening up when we finish this sequestration. We may be doing something that I'm not familiar with. Together, I want to be hopeful that we'll figure out some good things, but I don't know. So I'd like to think that we're more committed, and I'm finding business colleagues and governmental folks who are willing to help fund and private dollars to say, we will work together to figure out what it looks like, and it's got to be supportive of people. It's got to create robust economic opportunity. It has to be in harmony with other countries. This is not a time for the US to be in a warlike posture. So from my perspective, I have these big ideas that I think I'm supposed to be influencing because I'm talking about these topics with colleagues, and we're in a position to help think about some of these. But gosh, I'm not even clear on what I need to get through this, but I want to be hopeful. I want to be hopeful. That's me. What comments do you all have about what we need to get through this?
Yeah, I have another thing. So something we do with other people is we have like 30 days, kind of like a 30-day challenge where every single day it's a slightly different assignment. So like one day we shared like 3 songs we're loving right now and like why. One day we could share like a picture of a pet and like a pet that makes us smile, or like a video of us with our pet. Just celebrating like different things that make people happy and just finding like those like, I guess, pockets of sunshine in our days to like focus on and then share with other people. So I thought that was celebrating like how each of us are different, like this time, like despite like all the hardships, and not really pressuring people to do certain things. Some people like to dance. I saw one of my friends made like a 100-layer milk crepe cake on it, and she posted it on Instagram, and I didn't even know that she baked. And I was like, wow, like I've seen people do a lot of really interesting things, and I feel like I've gotten to know them a little bit better too. But just like all the creativity, I've just actually seen like an eruption of creativity from like songs to drawings to paintings to
Bolton,
Pause for a
Bolton,
bit.
Bolton.
and some things to kind of take their mind off of everything else, I think. So I forget what that's called, but I think it's a state called like a flow state or something, when you're so immersed in an activity that you really like or you're good at, or it's just like your thing and you kind of lose track of time. And I think studies have shown that people who engage in activities that cause them to lose track of time tend to be happier. And I'm wondering what that's about.
I'm sure I've heard that. I know that book, Flow, is a famous book that I'm sure David has read a few times. Let's jump to this slide called Climbing the Steps to Success. And I think it is something that we should be thinking about in terms of what I think we're giving ourselves permission to think of, which is maybe there's a little failure along the way. And what comes to mind instantly for me are the scientists who try many experiments which tell them this is not the answer, to find that one answer that is the cure for a particular disease or the invention of a particular helpful drug or therapy. How do we think about swinging the bat and trying things, as you were talking about finding activities in this time frame? The steps to success might be trying lots of things or working really hard at things, and maybe we're more afraid now. Maybe we feel more alone now and isolated, and I don't know how to process taking on a new challenge or the normal encouragement I get from social situations. But I'd like to open that up and think about what new things we want to be pursuing, what stops us from getting started or stops us after a setback in this environment.
I like to. Sorry.
Please.
One thing that a couple of things I'd like to touch on is this idea of trying something new and of being afraid that it might not work out at first. I know for me, a couple of ways that I dealt with my anxiety were through the arts, but this idea of trying something new was handling my anxiety through fitness. And 3 years ago, I would have never thought that would be something that would help address my anxiety. Now, in present time, I love fitness, and I would have never thought that would be my success to address that. So in this current time, I believe people are afraid to try new things, but we're just so fixated in that moment of that failure that we don't see the bigger picture ahead. Just like how I would have never seen fitness to be such an important factor in my life. So now something my approach to this is trying something new, but not being afraid to fail at it, is trying something new and learning more, learning from it, as opposed to thinking that I failed because it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to turn out.
So Brendan, did you let other people know you're swinging the bat or trying something, or did you keep it quiet until you proved you could work out for 3 days in a row, or how do you manage that?
I only told people who I felt were important to tell, because you definitely get you get all sorts of people, when they hear your plans, and that's just it. I only told the people that I felt were important to know, and who add to my success, not bring it down or be critical about it.
Mm-hmm. You stack the deck in your favor by choosing the right people. Way to go.
Thank you.
What I like about this graphic and this concept of stair steps on the way to success, and like failure is definitely like an integral part. And the way that I kind of look at it is like going up and then going to the side could maybe be failure, and then going up could maybe be a success, or maybe it could even be reversed, because they're both so important. And I think we talked about this during the pre-chat, how the steps can actually be different sizes from each other. or they might not all be like perfectly uniform, and it might not be measurable like that. But I think it's cool, and when I see like uneven steps in my mind, it's kind of comforting, because it's like, okay, like one day you might have a slow start to your day, or just like watch a TV show that's like really interesting all day, and then be like, okay, that was really great. That was like part of like the overall journey. And then the next day I might like get back to working on what I was working on, and realizing like, okay, it's okay. Like not being in a place where I feel like oppressed by time, like I didn't do it. So that's like a negative point or something, like on some sort of like mental chart. And another thing is, I don't know if you guys have experienced this before. I think I saw a meme about it where like even numbers in time, like people feel the need to start. So like if you don't start something at 4 o'clock, it's like, oh, now I gotta wait till 5 o'clock. I think that's like one example of time being oppressive.
David's nodding. Yeah. We never start meetings at 4:22. I've never had a 4:22 meeting.
But
in my
what's
life.
wrong with 4? I still, in my mind, like sometimes I use it to motivate myself. I'm like, no, 400, and if I don't do it, then 500. But then I feel good about it, and I don't know why. I have to like think about this.
Thank you. I'm going to commit this whole week coming up. When I'm orchestrating meetings, I'm making sure they start at odd numbers. I'm going to pick some really odd numbers.
Yeah. So like now is the time for innovation.
Yeah.
There are so many things we can do both to innovate our own personal life and sense of self, and how we conceptualize the world around us, but also innovating the way that we approach our work. I think that that's one of the gifts that we can possibly glean from this horrible, tragic situation, is different ways of being. And there, again, the limit does not exist. There are endless ways of being. There are endless ways of doing the same thing. And the only way that we're going to get there is if we try it. And that's going to inevitably include these quote unquote failures. You know, I'm a professor in my main job. I consider myself an educator overall, and I'm always pushing my students. I train students in counseling techniques, and I'm always pushing them to try something new. Even if it's something that they may have invented on their own, I'm like, this is the only way that you're going to learn. This is the only way you're going to know if this is actually going to be effective, is if you try it. And sometimes it's not going to work out, but at least you'll have learned that that wasn't the way to go in the situation, right? And so those steps are so real, right? That's the only way we're going to get to success, is if we try out new things. And this is our time to do that. We have so much time to innovate right now.
Absolutely. I want to thank you all. This has been so much fun. We want to do more of these, I think. Let's put up that green screen that says Ideas for Staying Balanced. And let's think about what we just covered. A lot of rich territory. Thank you, Dr. David Rivera, National Advisor, Steve Fund, among your many other important roles. Jay Wang, our leader at the Student Advisory Board. Brandon, thanks for joining. Alexis, thank you. And Annie Bell, thank you. I'm Gordon Bell, and this has been a terrific conversation sponsored by the Steve Fund, and we hope to do more and stay connected and stay frosty, stay lively as we open up for possibilities for ourselves and for others. So more online resources, there's the stevefund.org, and the others you see here, activeminds.org, 7 Cups. And we really hope that folks tune in or see this at some point and want to subscribe and stay connected to the Steve Fund. Thanks so much, everybody.